The case of Mirna Salihin. There's that cohort of buddies who have been friends with you since the dawn of time. Everyone comes in and out of everyone else's lives, from when you both embark on your separate journeys. But when you finally meet up again, it feels as though no time has elapsed. In 2016, this is how Mirna Salihin would reunite with old friends over coffee. Before the meeting could end in under 30 minutes, Mirna, who was young and vibrant, was dead. No one knew what happened to Mirna until a medical investigation at the cafe security camera lens. I'm sure you won't believe what happened to Mirna or who was the manslayer. On March 30th, 1988, Wayan Mirna Salihin was born in Jakarta, Indonesia. She had a twin sister and was the daughter of a reasonably well-off businessman. I'll do my best to provide you with as much information as I can about Mirna, because regretta, it seems from the tales I've read that she had a really pleasant, typical childhood and knew she wanted to be a graphic designer since she was very young. One of Australia's most renowned design schools, Billy Blue College of Design in Sydney, is where she chose to enroll in design school after her high school graduation in 2007. Because of this, they frequently have international students come to Sydney. Because of this, Mirna found it quite simple to establish a group of college friends who were also from Indonesia. Their group, which met together for studying, shopping and general hangout, was extremely awesome. Having that small link from home is always great. Jassica Kumala Wongso, an Indonesian who was also one of Mirna's closest college friends, had sought to become an Australian citizen with the intention of staying there permanently. After school ended, Jassica stayed in Australia, while Mirna and most of the other girls headed home. Nevertheless, they took care to stay in contact via phone calls, texts, and social media, and they scheduled a follow-up in-person meeting. They kind of drifted apart, as is often the case in life. Ultimately, they were separated by an ocean, and they were both going through really important life transitions. Everything was hectic. Mirna fell deeply in love with Arif Sumarko as soon as she met him. The two intended to tie the knot and have a family together. For Mirna, things were getting better. Jassica, though, was having trouble. Her relationship with her partner was erratic and unsatisfactory. People who knew them both said he struggled with drugs and alcohol, and a lot of that was affecting Jassica. In order to catch up with some of her former pals, including Jassica, her best friend, Mirna makes the decision to return to Australia in 2014. Because of their drastically different lives, they've been a little distant over the past few years. But Mirna was hoped that they would be able to resume where they left off. Regretfully, things did not turn out as expected. Gathering over lunch, they discussed their life and the past several years of activities. Jassica opened out to Mirna about her unhealthy connection with her partner. It was probably simply one of those conversations where Jassica needed to talk to us. However, Mirna believed that Jassica was not receiving the treatment she needed and that she was capable of much more. Ultimately, Jassica was told to shove him aside by Mirna. She wasn't a good fit for her partner. Jassica was not impressed with the life lessons. She became so enraged that she simply stood up and left the table, not even leaving any cash to cover her share of the bill. By then, their friendship had all but ended, as Jassica was unable to listen to anything Mirna had to say. She had broken up with that toxic boyfriend once and for all, and she was battling some pretty severe depression. She was in and out of the hospital after attempting to take her own life on 4 different occasions, and she was drinking heavily. So heavily that she got into a car accident while drunk. Luckily for her, the other person involved survived, and she walked away with only a broken rib and a few scratches. And so it's agreed. The 3 women will meet up at a trendy coffee shop called Olivier Cafe at an upscale Jakarta mall on January the 6th, 2016 at around 5 p.m. CCTV footage would capture the whole meeting, and Jassica lets them know that she's already gone ahead and ordered them drinks. 2 cocktails, 1 for her and 1 for Hani, and an iced coffee for Mirna. The women sit down. Mirna takes a sip of her iced coffee and says it tastes terrible. From there, everything happened very quickly. Mirna falls off her chair and begins to convulse on the floor with foam coming out of her mouth. Believing that she might be having a seizure, cafe staff run over and try to assist. They try to perform CPR, but nothing is helping. An ambulance is called, while Honey calls Mirna's husband crying, telling him what has happened and to meet them at the hospital. While Honey calls Mirna's husband crying, telling him what has happened and to meet them at the hospital. She was only 27 years old and very healthy. None of her friends or family could understand how she could just suddenly die like this. Back at the coffee shop, they begin to look at their equipment and their supplies, trying to find anything that may have made Mirna sick, but they couldn't find anything, and another 10 iced coffees were served earlier that day without anyone getting sick. At first, this was believed to be an accident, but everything would change when the medical examiner looked at Mirna's body. While a full autopsy was not done due to religious reasons, the medical examiner did report that her intestines showed corrosion, which meant she may have been poisoned, possibly with cyanide. Her mouth was also black. Now the police were ready to step in. They went back to the cafe. Unfortunately, the iced coffee that Mirna had consumed had been thrown out by staff, so they weren't able to test it. But they did interview all of the staff who had been working there that day, and several of them pointed to Jessica as behaving very strangely that day. They stated that she had been in the cafe earlier in the day and had just sat there by herself long before her friends ever arrived. They also said that she was acting really weird when her friend was convulsing on the floor. She seemed very calm and was yelling at the staff that they had put something in her drink before her friends ever arrived. They also said that she was acting really weird when her friend was convulsing on the floor. She seemed very calm and was yelling at the staff that they had put something in her drink. Police pulled the CCTV footage from the cafe that day and confirmed their statements. Here's what they saw in the video. On January 6th, the day of the meetup, Jessica gets to the cafe early. I mean really early. She arrives around 3:30 p.m., sits at a table for a bit, and then gets up and leaves. She is seen on CCTV footage returning to the cafe around 40 minutes later, now carrying 3 shopping bags full of soap with her. She says they are gifts for the friends she'll be seeing. She's still very early to the meeting, but she decides to grab a seat at table 54 and wait. A while later, Jessica goes to the counter and orders some drinks, 2 cocktails and an iced coffee. When they arrive at the table, she puts her 3 shopping bags on top of the table, which is a really strange thing to do, and it kind of obscures the view of the 3 drinks. She makes a series of movements over the bags, but the video is fuzzy and not completely clear as to what specific movement she makes. Police say they believe this is when she would have put the cyanide in the iced coffee. A while later, she takes the bags off the table and puts them back on the empty seat beside her. She continues to wait for her friends, because again, she's insanely early, like an hour early. At around 5:15 p.m., Mirna and Hani arrive at the cafe and they greet each other with hugs. They sit down at the table and Jessica gives the drinks to her friends, the cocktail to Hani and the iced coffee to Mirna. Mirna takes a sip of the coffee and makes a hand gesture as she says that the drink tastes disgusting. She asks Jessica to taste it, but Jessica refuses. Hani, however, does take a small sip. Moments later, Mirna begins to convulse on the floor. This is when, allegedly, Jessica accuses the cafe staff of putting something in her drink. And they say that she seemed way more concerned with blaming them than getting any kind of help for her friend. The video footage is enough for the police to formally arrest Jessica and charge her with Mirna's premeditated murder, which carries a maximum penalty of the death sentence. In Indonesia, that means death by a firing squad. This case would become an absolute media sensation in Indonesia. People were shocked that a woman would allegedly poison her friend's iced coffee with cyanide, especially Mirna's family and friends, who knew that the 2 women had once been very close when attending college together. Oddly enough, people who seemingly had a morbid curiosity began to flock to the cafe Mirna where died. They wanted to sit at the booth where she was poisoned and enjoy their own iced coffee Mirna's family really pushed for this to be a death penalty case. However, there was an agreement made between the Australian government, where Jessica was a permanent resident, and the Indonesian government, where all of this happened. And that meant the death penalty was off the table, where Jessica was a permanent resident, and the Indonesian government, where all of this happened. And that meant the death penalty was off the table. Going to trial, there was a lot of circumstantial evidence brought forward, including the CCTV footage. But again, it was really difficult to say if the movements that Jessica made were actually her putting cyanide in the iced coffee. But the prosecution did have some solid points. Why did Jessica refuse to take a sip of the iced coffee after Mirna said it tasted off and asked her to taste it? Also, what about her strange behavior after Mirna is on the ground unresponsive? She was seen on the tape and by cafe staff and guests just sort of standing there unfazed. But she was also seen scratching her hands and rubbing them against her hands, which experts say could be because she had handled cyanide, which makes the skin itchy. I'll also note here that the following day, Jessica disposed of those pants, so they could never be tested. And of course, that raises a red flag too. But what would be the motive behind Jessica so heartlessly killing her longtime friend? The prosecution pointed to that argument and the falling out they had a few years back, when Mirna talked badly about Jessica's boyfriend and told her they should break up. In my opinion, it seems kind of like a weak motive, but I guess people have killed for less. It was noted by witnesses back in Australia that Jessica's mental health was suffering badly. She didn't take the breakup with her boyfriend well. She had tried to take her own life on several occasions. She had been fired from her long-time job. Mirna was now working as a graphic designer. She had a happy marriage and was going to be starting a family soon. Maybe it was that comparison and jealousy that drove her to kill her long-time friend. Jessica's defense team pushed back, stating that all of that was just circumstantial. And besides, where would she have even obtained cyanide? And would Jessica really fly all the way from Australia back to Indonesia just to act on a grudge from years ago and murder her friend? They brought a new theory and a new suspect to the table: Mirna's husband, Arif. They claimed that one of the baristas from the cafe came forward to say that he was paid money by Arif to poison his wife. However, when this barista was brought to the stand to testify, he denied such claims, saying that it never happened and asking why he was still working as a barista if he were paid so much money by the husband to kill Mirna. That theory kind of fell apart, so they pushed back against the idea that Mirna died of cyanide poisoning at all. Why was Honey, who had also sipped the coffee after Mirna, fine and healthy? Which is an interesting question. Maybe she sipped it enough to touch her lips, and then let it go back in because it tasted so bad? I'm not sure. According to expert witnesses, there is no toxicological evidence of the ingesting of cyanide, and while there was some cyanide found in her stomach, it was not enough to kill her. Unfortunately, the only way to conclude if Mirna had died of cyanide poisoning is through an autopsy. But due to religious reasons, her family refused to have one performed. In my opinion, the defense team actually makes a compelling argument. Cases that are based entirely on circumstantial evidence are quite difficult to prove. And then without an autopsy, and the fact that Hani was also seen on video sipping the same coffee but was okay, it does create doubt. But is it enough to say Jessica from serving jail time? The trial went on for 5 months and was broadcast across all of Indonesia. Less than a year after Mirna's death, in October 2016, Jessica Kumala Wongso was found guilty of the murder of Mirna Salihin. She was sentenced to 20 years in jail, and she was very lucky to escape the death penalty. The day the verdict was read, the courtroom was jam-packed with people who supported Jessica and thought she was innocent. Jessica gave a statement saying that the trial was unfair and one-sided. She has since tried to appeal her conviction, but has been denied every time.